Presbyterians for Earth Care, Rhythm. Conferencing is one of the ways in which we gather, and I see the Earth Care teams as a way that we gather as well, opportunity for us to gather. This is our 25th anniversary year. We were founded obviously in 1995. That came 5 years after the seminal denominational policy statement on restoring creation for ecology and justice. We work closely in partnership with Presbyterians for the Presbyterian Hunger Program, and we're glad to be working with them today on this webinar. So Presbyterians for Earth Care is the organization that is not under the Church of the Umbrella. That gives us an opportunity to work in ways that staff or cannot work. For example, where policy has not been established by the denomination, we're able to work as advocates for that policy. Another part of that ebb and flow is the inward and outward journey, and just would like to call attention to our Lenten devotional series for the upcoming season of Lent, and also encourage you to use Eco-Palms and spread that word. Orders are being taken now for Eco-Palms, which is another initiative that Presbyterians, at the time Presbyterians for Restoring Creation and the Presbyterian Hunger Program worked on launching as their contribution to an ecumenical initiative. We hope to be playing a greater role in the climate negotiations that take place, UN climate negotiations that take place every year, and the upcoming COP26 in Glasgow, Scotland in November. A lot of our advocacy work is around climate change, and we're also very much aware of the grief and mental health issues that surround a world that's trying to cope with changing climate, and recognize that a number of us on this call today are experiencing grief for reasons that may or may not be related to climate change. And thank you for showing up today. And I'll turn it over now to Jane Laping, our coordinator with Presbyterians for Earth Care.
Thank you, Dennis. It's wonderful to see so many of you on this webinar today. This is something I have been dreaming about for years, and I'm so glad to see that it is happening today. Sorry, I'm trying to get my slides up here and I'm not doing a very good job. Try this again. Okay, now I have an unstable internet connection. Right. Here we go. Okay, I can't do two things at once. I can't talk and set up my slides at the same time. So let me start over. Yes, I am Jane Laping. I'm the coordinator for Presbyterians for Earth Care, and a position I've held for about 5 years. And what I do is I do the administrative communication, events, and programming tasks for the organization. So I am thrilled that so many of you are on this webinar. I've been dreaming of a Presbyterians for Earth Care webinar for many years, and I'm so grateful to Jessica and the Presbyterian Hunger Program for hosting it and making it a reality. At this time, I would also like to thank the PEC Steering Committee, and especially Nancy Fayer and Rick Person for their hard work at making this project come to fruition. As you watch this webinar, I challenge you to think of yourself not just as a doer, but as a leader. Climate change is now a crisis situation, and people are literally ready to do something. What is lacking are leaders. You could be a leader of your Presbyterian's Earth Care team. Think of the impact this could have for earth care in the Presbyterian Church and in the country. So let's get started. The idea of a Presbyterian earth care team came from the need for Presbyterians for earth care to be more effective at reaching out to churches and to individuals in churches. Our purpose in starting this program is for PEC to collaborate with individuals and churches to become better stewards of God's creation. So the question is, how does a small organization like Presbyterians for Earth Care with a limited budget and a part-time coordinator reach over 1 million members of the Presbyterian Church in the US and nearly 10,000 churches? Can you see where I'm going with this? Our strategy is focused on presbyteries. There are 170 of them. The foundation of this strategy is to form Presbyterian earth care teams. These presbytery level teams will reach out to congregations in their presbytery and provide them with resources and encouragement to include creation care in all aspects of church life. Let's unpack this strategy to make it a bit clearer. What does it mean to form earth care teams at the presbytery level? Some of you may have an earth care team at your church, or you may wish you did. Our strategy involves forming such a team at a higher level that includes many churches, not just one. This webinar is focused on the presbytery, a region with about 50 to 100 churches. With this strategy, organization happens at a regional level, and education and activities serve the churches in the presbytery. Rather than collaborating with individual churches, the effect of the Presbyterian Earth Care team will be felt at the church level. But the approach is at the presbytery level using presbytery resources, including communication and in-person meetings. The second part of the strategy is to engage and support congregations. Representatives of some churches will respond eagerly to the education and activities of the Presbyterian Earth Care team, but others may need some prodding. One way to connect churches that may need some encouragement is to set up partner churches. That is, a church that has been integrating creation care into their Christian witness and ministry for a good while. For example, an earth care congregation could pair up with a nearby church that is struggling to get things started. PEC will also offer education through webinars like this one and support through monthly conference calls. The final piece of the strategy is to assist churches to integrate creation care into their Christian witness and ministry. Creation care is intended to be an integral part of a church's operations, from worship to outreach. The 1990 policy document, Restoring Creation for Ecology and Justice, calls the church to recognize and accept, quote, restoring creation as a central concern of the church, to be incorporated into its life and mission at every level, unquote. If you are familiar with earth care congregations, creation care in churches is described by 4 categories: worship, education, facilities, and outreach. So creation care doesn't just have to do with your church building. It isn't just about solar panels or recycling or styrofoam cups. Creation care is about how we recognize creation and praise the Creator in worship, how we teach our children, youth, and adults about taking care of God's creation and finding spiritual enrichment in nature, how we share our resources with others in the community, partner with environmental organizations, and advocate for laws that protect the awesome planet that God has given us. Presbyterian Earth Care teams will have many options for education and activities, and PEC can help. More about that later. Before PEC developed this program, We interviewed 11 presbyteries with existing earth care teams and asked them what worked and what didn't, and what they thought made their team successful. Then we took that information and put it in a form to be useful to those who are starting an earth care team or sustaining an existing one. We also prepared a resource directory where you can find examples of what others have done. Together, we call these documents a toolkit. And this is what you've been waiting for. It will be available on our website and will also be emailed to you within a few days. So don't feel like you have to take notes during this presentation. It has already been written out for you, so you can just listen and absorb what is being said. In the next few slides, we will briefly go over the procedure of starting and sustaining an earth care team that was informed by the interviews we conducted. The examples in this presentation and in the toolkit were reported by the Presbyterian earth care teams we interviewed. Here is a list of the presbyteries we interviewed. I have included this because I knew that you would be curious. If your presbytery has an earth care team, remember that we are talking about the presbytery level now, not congregational. So if your presbytery has an earth care team that is not on this list, please type it into the chat box now. We have now covered the purpose of a presbytery earth care team and the strategy. So how do you get started? And how do you keep a presbytery earth care team going? From our interviews, we have determined 5 goals to complete in order to start and sustain a presbytery earth care team. The first goal is to form a presbytery earth care team, and this may sound easier than it is. A good place to start is to look at the structure of your presbytery and find it to be a good fit for an earth care team and ask to be part of it. One of the things we learned through our interviews is that successful teams started with a passionate leader. If you are that person, or if you know of someone who is, you are well on your way. Rather than trying to do this alone, identify 1 to 2 other people to form a core group and brainstorm ideas of what your presbytery earth care team could look like. It would also be a good idea to draft a description of the team and a mission statement to take to a larger group. There are examples in the toolkit to get you started. Once you have completed those tasks, then set a date, time, and location of your first meeting, publicize it, and recruit others to join. Now you are ready for your first meeting. Structure this meeting like any other committee meeting. There are many things that will need to be accomplished in your early meetings. Aim to complete these 6. Number 1, the purpose. Remember what it is? To engage and support congregations in integrating creation care into their church's Christian witness and ministry. You can elaborate on this to get your team thinking. Number 2, a mission statement. If you already drafted one, now is the time to share it. If people like it, great. If not, you may need to ask a small group to redraft it outside the meeting. Number 3, brainstorm projects. This can be energizing for a committee to just throw out ideas without judgment. You will want your team to choose a project that can be quickly and inexpensively completed to build confidence and create momentum. Number 4, your team will need a name. You can come up with one, but you can always call it a Presbyterian Earth Care Team and change it later if that's too hard to do at your first meeting. Number 5, communication. How will you communicate with one another? Will you communicate by email, phone, social media, texting, megaphone? Number 6, schedule your next meeting, including the location. Your presbytery may be able to set you up with a Zoom call like this one. Presbyteries can cover a very large area. The advantage of a Zoom call is that no one has to travel, and eliminating travel is one way we can lower our impact on God's creation. The third goal for starting and sustaining a Presbyterian Earth Care team is to schedule activities and events. At your next or future meeting, you may have chosen a project at your first meeting, so you could start doing this now. How will you carry that out? You may want to invite speakers or hold a panel discussion, lead a book study, or hold a training event. If you think of other activities or events while I am talking, go ahead and type them into the chat box. Keep in mind that these activities are for the entire presbytery, not one church. So if you decide to have your event at a church, be sure to invite all churches in the presbytery. Goal number 4. After your team has been going for about a year, reflect on how your team has carried out its plan in the presbytery. Decide what worked and what didn't. You could discuss if things could have been done better or differently. If your team has not completed its goals, decide whether to continue working on them or do something else. Then set some goals for the coming year. Finally, goal number 5. Share what you have done. Everyone loves to be recognized for their accomplishments. At the very least, report to your presbytery committee. You could announce your accomplishments at a presbytery meeting or request that it be included in the presbytery packet or newsletter. You could also ask to make a presentation at your presbytery meeting, as some teams have done. This may sound like a lot of work, and it can be, but remember that you are not doing this alone. I believe that God is with each one of us, and you have a team of motivated and talented volunteers who are interested and willing to make changes so that churches can be leaders in caring for God's creation. The EC will be hosting monthly conference calls where you can share your successes and challenges, hear possible solutions, and encourage one another. Our first call will be Monday, March 9th, and we will email you a reminder of the date and time along with the Zoom call-in number. It has been my pleasure to introduce you to Presbyterians for Earth Care's new program, Presbyterian Earth Care Teams. Again, my name is Jane Laping, and if you'd like to contact me, my email and phone number are on this slide. I would love to talk with each one of you and hear what you are doing in your presbytery or what your plans are. We will have questions and answers at the end of this webinar. Now we will hear from 2 presbyteries that have Earth Care teams. Barbara Overton from the Presbytery of Tropical Florida will talk about her efforts at starting a Presbyterian Earth Care team recently. And Barry McPherson will tell us about the Presbytery of Cascades Eco-Justice Team that has been going for 30 years. Yes, Virginia, it is possible to sustain a Presbyterian Earth Care team. I am signing out for now, so over to you, Barbara.
Great. Hello, I am Barbara Overton, and now let me share my screen. And I will be talking about the work that we've been doing here in South Florida to initiate an Earth Care team. But first, let me thank Jessica and the Presbyterians for Earth Care for the invitation to speak with you today. We're at the very beginning in our presbytery in starting this Earth Care team, so I want to talk about how we're approaching it. But first, I wanted to tell you a little bit about myself and what led me to where we are today. So my name is Barbara Overton. I live in Miami, Florida. I have paid work as an attorney, but a lot of my time and energy is spent on environmental matters, which includes picking up trash to keep plastics out of the ocean And I love working with artists where they take that trash and turn it into artwork. I will be very clear, I'm merely providing the supplies. I don't do any of the artwork. I'm a member of Riviera Presbyterian Church here in Miami. We have a very long history of environmental action. We always say it's part of our DNA. And you can see some of the congregational activities here on the slide. Riviera celebrated its 75th anniversary this weekend, and we had a beach cleanup as part of the activities because the church wanted to make sure we included earth care in the anniversary events. Riviera is in the Presbytery of Tropical Florida, which is the southern part of Florida. It stretches over 6 counties with 42 churches, and it's a really beautiful part of Florida.
Barbara, I'm sorry to interrupt you. If you're progressing your slideshow, we can't see it.
Ah, okay. Let me see, let me try again. Is it, no, it's not progressing now. This all worked when we practiced. Let me start again. Are you seeing the slides? The first slide?
I see the first slide, yes, ma'am.
But you don't see the second slide?
No.
They're really great slides too. One more time. Now do you see it? You're seeing the whole thing now, right?
We see it progressing. You're in the PowerPoint software.
One more time.
Thank you all for your patience with
Yeah,
us.
sorry about this. We practiced and it worked and everything. There you go. You got it?
No, we don't see.
Do you see the second slide?
There you go.
Awesome. Okay, so there you go. There's my beautiful artwork that I've worked with. There's a little bit about Riviera Presbyterian Church and the activities that we've been doing. Here's a little map that shows us the Presbytery of Tropical Florida. And you can see we're a very long and skinny presbytery. We're also, hold on, for some reason I'm having to advance 2 things. South Florida is also ground zero for environmental matters. When you look at South Florida, we've got 3 national parks and miles of coastline that needs protecting. We routinely are subject to things like red tide, sunny day flooding, blue-green algae. Our coral reefs are in danger, our water quality is at risk, sea level is rising, habitat for wildlife is shrinking, and the list goes on. So when I started looking at how to address environmental work in South Florida, I really wanted to involve other earth care congregations in South Florida in this work. And unfortunately, this is what I found. There's only one, and that's Riviera Presbyterian Church. Really, just one? So I started thinking about how to get more churches engaged in environmental stewardship and how to bring both the religious and the secular groups that I work with together to address these issues. I think one of the things that churches don't do well is reach out to other experts in the field And in reverse, I think that the secular group should be reaching out to churches because I believe we bring a lot to this conversation. So as I was thinking, I saw this invitation for the Presbyterians for Earth Care Conference that Dennis talked about, and it was absolutely perfect. My fellow member from Riviera, Michelle, and I showed up, and we went off to what my daughter called PEC camp. It was an absolutely wonderful experience, and I really do recommend it for everyone. It won't come around again until next year, but I really do suggest you do that. And I'll also make the pitch now that each one of us should become members, you individually and you as your congregation, of Presbyterians for Earth Care. They do great work in this area, and I think we should all try to support them both with our membership and, if you can, with financial support. And their email address is presbyearthcare.org, and I'm sure Jane will be happy to share that with everyone. Oops, sorry. You know I have the wrong slide, right? Okay, sorry about that. My slides got screwed up. So at the Presbyterian conference, we really had a great opportunity to learn so much. And the one thing I really learned about it was that there was more information than we needed to get started. In other words, we were inundated with information. And as soon as I get the slide back up, I'll show you some of that. But you know, there's information on the Presbyterian website, PCUSA, Earth Care Team. There's information on, let's see if I can share this again. On the GA website. I know Dennis talked about one of the overtures. There's a bunch more of those that I think are incredibly helpful. In fact, we used one of those when we met with our presbytery for the first time. Hold on, let's see if I can share this screen again. Sorry about this. We really practiced.
I'll just jump in while Barbara is working on sharing her screen. Some of the GA policies that she's talking about you can find on pcusa.org/climate. There is a listing of all of those that are applicable.
Oh, that's great. There was also, we got a chance to meet a lot of other groups that work in this area, including groups like Interfaith Power and Light. And I think that was the other thing that was very helpful, was to really learn how to reach out to these groups and figure out what they're doing and how they can help us do our work. There's a lot of liturgy resources that were made available as well. And again, Dennis talked about one of those, and that was the one for Lent. But we also have them, both PCUSA and Presbyterians for Earth Care have those available. And one I particularly want to call out is the one for Earth Care that has come out, and one that I think everyone can really take advantage of. This is, I'm sorry, Earth Day. It's the 50th anniversary of Earth Day, and there's a great PCUSA resource called The Fierce Urgency of Now. So I would hope that people could take a look at that as well. Okay, let's see. Is this sharing now? No. Let's try it. I'm gonna try one more time and then you're just gonna get words. You got it?
Yes.
Awesome, okay. So, all right, so as we go on. So again, I want to kind of caution you, as you start doing this work, you're going to get overwhelmed with information, and that's really not the point. The point is to start the conversation, because you're never going to have an Earth Care team if you don't just get started. And so the first thing we did was get aligned with leadership. We were very fortunate that our our pastor, Missy Shiverick, was really engaged in this work and helped us with that. And then our general presbyter was more than welcoming and really wanted us and encouraged us to come and meet and be with the presbytery. We also needed to develop relationships with different people. And this is one that was a bit of a problem for me because I didn't know a lot of people in the presbytery. And so I've had to use my pastor, my church administrator, Darius, and others to help us make those connections. One of the things that I think the toolkit will help us with this is to think about different ways of communicating. Because we're spread out so far, it's almost impossible for us to meet in person, even as a presbytery, much less as a small earth care team. And then finally, I really hope people will learn to overcome the objections that you're going to find as you try to set this up, that you celebrate small victories, but you also set some big goals and really try to be ambitious in what you do. So communication techniques, some of these are obvious. In-person conversations were the most impactful as we try to set this up, but networking also made a big difference. We also were able to work with the newsletter that our presbytery does to get the word out. We don't have social media, but if we did, I think it would be helpful. And then finally, Google survey has been really helpful. The Google surveys, we sent around to people who were interested and we asked them this series of questions, which you can read, and we asked them if they were doing it, if they were working on it, if they were thinking about it, or if they weren't interested at all. So we asked this set of questions and then these. And you can see just different types of things around building, worship, education, advocacy. We learned that there were some churches interested in becoming earth care congregations, but nobody was really working on solar panels. They had other things that they were doing in terms of energy saving work. They do tend to have earth care in their worship and education, and kind of mixed use on some of the other items that we were looking at. We allowed some open-ended questions and got some great feedback, a lot of which was, please share resources with us. They also would like us to share money, so if anybody has any big pockets of grants, let me know about that. But really helping the churches do a better job in earth care was where we were getting the best vibe about what we should be doing. I mentioned overcoming objections because when we had these conversations, we kept hearing that people's churches were either too broke, too busy, too old, too young, too big, too small, too whatever to try to do earth care. And we really tried to work with each one of them to say, every church can do something. And there's great resources, again, on the PCUSA website about, for example, a 13-member church who put in solar panels. So given the urgency of this issue, especially in South Florida, we've tried to really explain this is one of the most important issues we need to tackle. Because if we don't, in 50 years, in South Florida, those old, broke, busy churches are all going to be underwater. So, celebrate small victories. One of the things that we learned was that people didn't know what fair trade coffee was. So we had a chance to talk about that at Presbytery and promote that. We also are setting some goals. We've been asked to try to get 5 earth care teams certified between now and the next February deadline. We're trying to be ambitious. In addition to the 5 earth care teams, we put an overture. The Riviera had seen this overture we thought was important in terms of earth care, and so we presented it to the Presbytery, and frankly, we were worried that there'd be a big fight about it. In fact, we were pleased that it sailed through on the consent agenda. So being willing to put yourself out there, I think, is important. And finally, you just got to keep working at it. Doing this is not a one-shot thing. We've been going to Presbytery now, every Presbytery, for the last several months. We're trying to look at short-term and long-term goals that will help us meet our needs. We're trying to be the voice for the Presbytery on earth care, which is why we brought the overture. And I'm looking forward to the toolkit because we do need to figure out better ways to communicate and to bring us from some conversations to really defined action. And if you happen to be in South Florida or know someone who would like to be on the team, please let me know. My email is on the screen. And so now I'm going to be really jealous and turn it over to someone who actually has a very mature team and is going to share some information about that. Barry?
Oh, thank you. That's some exciting stuff and good lessons and ideas that you had there. So let me try and share my screen. Okay, you're going to need to tighten your seatbelt for a fast trip through 30 years in about 10 minutes here by the Cascade Presbyterian Eco-Justice Team. From outdoors to indoors, that's been our focus. So how we got started. Our team was formed under the Church and Society Committee in the 1980s. It needed to be under some committee, and that was the one that fit best at the time. The team was definitely inspired by the General Assembly's resolution on restoring creation for ecology and justice, 1990. I am a 20-year team member. I started in the late 1980s and was gone for a while, and then I've been with the team for the last 18 years. I became a co-chair in 2007 and then chair of the team in about 2017. Jenny Holmes was hired by our presbytery as the Restoring Creation Enabler back in 1996, and she became a consultant to the team from 2000 to 2014. She was volunteering with the team before then, and she has been a terrific volunteer leader since then. The team was moved under the Congregational Support Committee in 2007, which made sense because we were providing support to congregations on this specific area. Unfortunately, team funds were cut in 2015, part of the unprogrammed presbytery where all of our programs got cut dramatically. I must let you know that at one point we had a budget of over $10,000 a year. $2,000 of that approximately was for program. Information distribution. Barbara's done a pretty good job of laying out that, so I'll go quickly. But I think we kind of started out with tables and displays with handouts at presbytery meetings in the hallway sort of stuff. We developed an email list, and I think today you need to really consider Facebook and texting. We did not get that far. We did get a Eco-Justice page on the Presbytery's website where we could distribute information. And it's up there now. You might want to check that out. It's got some good things on it. As Barbara was talking about, articles in monthly and quarterly Presbytery newsletters. And we did presentations at Presbytery meetings to inform and to seek actions. We needed Presbytery leadership approval months before. It takes planning to be able to present something in a Presbytery meeting, especially if you're seeking a vote on something. We did use conferences and pre-Presbytery workshops to inform people. The conferences were half-day conferences that we conducted about every 2 years in different places around the presbytery. Our presbytery is pretty much the western half of Oregon, a little bit of the southern edge of Washington, western Washington, and a little bit of the northern edge of California. Then the 90-minute workshops, pre-presbytery workshops, were on the first morning of the presbytery meetings. And again, we had to obtain approval months in advance in order to conduct these workshops. They were in concert with workshops from other committees and on other topics. We had a wide variety of eco-theology and ecological topics over the years in these conferences and in the pre-presbytery workshops. For those, we recruited expert presenters. often from colleges in Oregon and elsewhere, some nationally known figures in the area, and from non-governmental organizations, environmental types of organizations. We always tried to have an action item for participants at the workshops and at the conferences. Action items were outdoors and indoors. For example, planting trees, cleaning streams, writing letters, and signing petitions. A big one for us was obtaining adoption of a resolution by our presbytery and then a concurrence with an overture to General Assembly. So Cascades Presbytery adopted our team's resolution in 2013, which was that it was resolved that the team and concerned congregations should advocate for full disclosure about the impact of expanded coal exports on the least of us. A lot of health issues as well as environmental issues, as the coal dust from these trains would spill and be blown within communities. That led to an overture from the Seattle Presbytery the next year. They saw our resolution and they developed an overture to General Assembly. That overture was affirming a programmatic review rather than an individual project by project review of the impact of expanded coal export projects on human health and well-being. It included environmental concerns as well. In fact, that was probably as bigger part of the overture. Since our presbytery concurred with the Seattle overture, we got to have an overture advocate go to General Assembly, and I was one of those people. Seattle Presbytery had one in northern Puget Sound Presbytery, which is now, I think, Alaskan Presbytery. They concurred with the overture, and so they sent an advocate also. The three of us got to speak 3 minutes each. That's all it was, but it was worth it. The overture was adopted. General Assembly wrote a key letter based on that overture, and that letter helped stop construction of a coal export terminal in Washington, in Puget Sound. It was highly appreciated by the Lummi Indian Nation, which had lands and sea life that would be affected by this terminal and the ships going through there. And I want to say youth testimony is always important. Here's a young college student providing testimony in one of our presbytery meetings. We lobbied societal decision makers. The resolution and the overture were two strong bases for doing that, because we could refer back to those as major bases of support for what we were saying. We gave team-approved testimony in letter and in person. We did it to local, state, and federal government officials. That included our governor, state legislators, and federal legislators, and state and federal agencies. We participated in the annual lobby days at the Oregon Capitol, in which you would visit your specific representative or senator, but on a combined effort, coordinated activity for specific purposes. And we always included a Christian basis for our testimony. Outdoor field trips, these were terrific because I put at the top, you care more for creation when you know more. So we would do what we called hike and pray, kayak and pray, fish and pray. We even did, where we attempted to do a snowshoe and pray, but there wasn't enough snow that winter. Thank you, climate change. But we turned it into a hike and pray event. Each of these events included lunch and a program with with expert speakers, or perhaps a film like Chasing Ice, a terrific film. We used our own or invited expert leaders. We had a wildlife biologist, and I'm a fish biologist, and we could lead in the field to provide information. We always had invitations to all congregations to participate in these events, and we had folks from other denominations participate, particularly in our hike and pray and kayak and pray events. Our biggest outdoor thing was the Spirit of the Salmon immersion tour that was conducted during the 2.5 days before the PEC conference that was held in Oregon in 2017. In that immersion tour, there was a high emphasis on Native American speakers. We also had NGO and other speakers. We had a terrific salmon dinner at a longhouse of the tribes, followed by dancing. And trying to imagine Native American drummers leading all us gray-haired folks dancing through the longhouse. It was really good. Finally, in 2018, we conducted a Columbia River sternwheeler and view of tribal fishing on the Columbia River. We did that with PEC's financial help because in the 2017 PEC conference, we were going to do a sternwheeler tour and couldn't. And so the sternwheeler company gave a rain check, which we then used in 2018, just in our half-day conference. Recruitment of Earth Care congregations was a major emphasis. We promoted these in several pre-presbytery workshops and during our conferences. And team members conducted some site visits to churches that were interested to help them get into the Earth Care congregation status. We promoted it on our webpage, within the Presbytery website and through the newsletters, and at our Presbytery meetings by getting up and talking, but also our table, and again through the Presbyterian newsletters. So we now have 6 Earth Care congregations in our Presbytery. Proud of that. So that is the end of my presentation, and thank you so much, Jane, for inviting me and for this opportunity to talk about our efforts.
Jane, did you have anything you wanted to add before we move to a question or two?
Based on the time left, I think we should just move right to the questions. Thank you.
Okay. The first question that I believe was asked, Barry, during your presentation was Mary was curious about if there were more people involved in the advocacy that you were talking about other than just your Presbytery team. Were there other churches that maybe weren't Earth Care congregations or other members that got involved other than just the people on your team?
Oh, I'm sure there were. I can't think of any specifics, but people are moved spiritually or otherwise to get involved and to speak out. And so at events or visits to legislators, there were definitely people from other congregations that might not have been an Earth Care congregation that, you know, spoke up.
Another question that we have, I think would be in regards to some follow-up, but Barbara, there is a request for you to share some of the sample questions from the Google survey that you used with your participants, or used in your presentation.
Sure, I'll be happy to do that, and maybe we can do that through the PEC toolkit that Jane's putting together.
Perfect.
I will just jump in here. That's already included in the toolkit.
A step ahead.
We have a question that I'm wondering if the person that has sent it can maybe say a little bit more, but they were asking about if we've thought about establishing an Earth Care Presbytery program, and that is sort of what this is about. So I'm not sure if there's a more specific question there that you could send us. There's.
I think I can answer that. That has come up before, and that is something that we will probably do next. It was just like too much to try and do both of the programs at the same time. So I think what this questioner is referring to is that the presbytery itself would become like an Earth Care congregation would become an Earth Care presbytery. So it would act in a way that was responsive to caring for God's creation.
Gotcha. Jane, maybe along those same lines, there's a question from Sally who says that you mentioned ongoing support for Presbytery green teams, and she wanted to know if you could say anything more about that.
Yes, so we will be doing webinars with Presbyterians, the Presbyterian Hunger Program occasionally. We have the guide that you will receive, and then we also will be having monthly conference calls.
I think maybe this will be the last question that we'll have time for, but, and yes, Jane, David said that you answered his question well about that, so thank you for that. But there was a question about if Barry or Barbara or any of you have done work to develop a recommendation list of some of those sustainable fair trade products that could be sent out to congregations. I know that some of that the Hunger Program has done, and we have vetted several providers of different goods that we could recommend to you, Beth. If you'd like to reach out to me, I'd be happy to send that to you. But Barry or Barbara, did either of your presbyteries kind of make those sustainable product lists that you sent out to folks?
We did in the Cascade Presbytery, but it was probably around the year 2005, so I think it's kind of outdated. But we did a lot of good earth keeping flyers, and that was one of them.
And I would have just gone to the PCUSA website, so that's where we are at this point.
Wonderful. Barry, maybe one more question. So you mentioned there are 6 Earth Care congregations that are members of your Presbytery's team, and they wanted to know how many congregations are in your presbytery and if you've heard of any reasons that other churches might have decided not to join the team.
Oh boy, I think we've got over 160 congregations. Our team is rather devoid of membership right now, and we don't necessarily have members from Earth Care congregations. They can be a member of the team without being an Earth Care congregation. And I'm sorry, what was the second part?
Just if you had heard any reasons that churches Presbyterian decided not to join.
I think sometimes they think it's too complicated and they're going to have to do a bunch of stuff, and they just don't have people to work on filling out the information. Those are the kind of things we hear, and that's why we tried to do some information and some site visits to show that it wasn't that hard.
Wonderful. I think that is maybe there's 1 or 2 more questions, but I think there are things that might be better answered in your follow-up email. And I think that might be all that we have time for today. On behalf of the Hunger Program, I want to express my gratitude to all of the folks that have presented today. We're excited about the opportunity for presbyteries to work at more of a presbytery level, and whatever we can do to help support that, we're here for. So thank you all very much for joining us today. Bye.
Bye. Thank you, Jessica. And thanks to all the presenters for being here. And for all the people who are on the webinar.